taking that leap into self-employment, like you're just never going to feel ready. And kind of the way things fell, I kind of got forced into doing it, I think, before I felt like I was ready. But I don't know if I ever would have been able to pull the trigger on my own or, because I was just like, it's scary. So it kind of just was a sink or swim moment of, okay, now I've got to figure out how to pay my bills.
On today's episode of Rise, Grind, Repeat, we talk to Cynthia from Fabulous Arizona. We talk about her marketing career and how her company highlights how fabulous Arizona is. Let's dive right in. So before we get kind of too far into Fabulous Arizona, I'd love to hear more about the marketing agency. Would love to learn just more about you. How did you get started as an entrepreneur?
Well, I kind of feel like since I was younger, I knew at some point I was going to own my own business. And so in high school, I was a manager for a Dairy Queen. And I noticed even at 17, 18 years old, I was already looking at the P&Ls and oh, this lid costs more than this lid. We have to make sure we're using the right lids. And, just kind of looking at things that the average person may not, really think about. And so I was already kind of, having those thoughts of entrepreneurship. And so I kind of knew someday I wanted to own my own business, but just had no idea. At that time, of course, I thought I was going to own a Dairy Queen someday. So funny how things change. But so I went to school for marketing at ASU. Actually, originally went for business management, but was kind of this is too broad. And after taking my psychology and sociology undergrad courses, I was really fascinated with that stuff. But it was how do I incorporate that in business? And marketing kind of does that with the consumer behavior aspect of it. So that kind of married those two passions together of the business and the psychology, and kind of got my foot in the door with internet marketing. My senior year last semester, I had to do an internship. And so I got an internship with this company called sheknows.com. And they were kind of very much in startup phase at that point. And this was back in 2007. So this was okay. MySpace days, before Instagram existed, that sort of thing. You couldn't buy, Facebook had just started a few years prior to that, but you could, business pages colleges, and right? Ads. Yeah. It was still, you had to have an EDU email address to get on there and that sort of thing. So, so the whole internet marketing thing was still really new when I got into it, which was great. So kind of dating myself, but I'm I've got quite a few years now in the industry, and really loved the online publishing aspect of digital marketing, of being able to, the analytics that you can gather as opposed to print advertising or something, you get to see how many people are viewing each article, what are people interested in, and which ads are they clicking on? And so that stuff was really fascinating to me. And, what I thought was just an internship to, get some class credit ended up being, I found my passion. And so kind of went from there, and here we are.
Yeah, no, speaking my language, I love the data and analytics. I'm a huge analytics nerd. And I mean, knowing that you have an agency, isn't it amazing how many people spend so much money on, traditional still has its value, but how many people undervalue the digital side when it's there's so much opportunity in identifying the people that are engaging with your content, the ability to then retarget them and continue that messaging.
It's amazing what you can do. And that's the thing is with a print ad, maybe you could get a few phone calls from somebody saying, oh, I saw you in this magazine, but it's really hard to really track how those are performing, as opposed to a digital. You can see how many people clicked on it and, how many people viewed it and how much reach it got. It's a lot more trackable. And like you said, with the retargeting and stuff, it can be really, the ROI can be a lot higher.
Yep. Love it. You can just make better business decisions. Yeah. You worked at Dairy Queen, you started looking at P&Ls very young. What does the next steps look like? When did you start your own kind of endeavor to where it was all right, I'm doing my own thing? Yeah.
So I, was running, I had a few different jobs, prior to going self-employed. And what I found is the ones that I really thrived in were startups, where I could kind of have my hands in everything and, really just kind of learn and grow and just, really not being told oh, you're in this box over here and this is your department, really being able to get my hands on everything in the business. Whereas the jobs that I didn't do well in were some corporate positions where you were very siloed, and I'd be well, what about this thing over here? And they're that's not your department. You can't talk about that. So I realized very quickly, I didn't last more than 3 to 6 months in any corporate job I've ever had. I just was miserable. So I realized then I was okay, definitely startup or my own company or something. And then just things kind of, I was working for a local magazine, running all their digital. And I kind of was like running all of it by myself. Like I literally was handling all of the editorial for the digital side, all of the ads, the web development. I mean, literally everything. So I was like, why am I not doing this for myself? So, so then I went and launched Fabulous Arizona. And at first it was kind of just like a, little side hobby thing. But then I was like, in my head, I knew what it could be, especially because of my background in digital and seeing, the other larger national magazines that I had, like digital magazines that I'd worked for, seeing how they could grow and what they could sell for and the amount of money they could make. I was like, this really does have a lot of potential. But how do I get there when I have no capital? So that was kind of my struggle in the beginning of just like trying to organically grow it with no money. So because I was working like, just temp jobs and stuff like that, and just trying to like make, pay rent, make ends meet. Yeah. And then doing this on the side. So, it was really difficult to grow it when it was just a side gig. So thankfully got a position with an online magazine in Chicago that let me work from home here. So they were like, as long as your work's getting done, we don't really care what hours you do it. So it gave me a lot of flexibility to be able to like take coffee meetings and go to events and stuff like that for Fabulous Arizona while, still having this full-time job, that was very flexible. So that was kind of the turning point for me of when I was able to put a little more time into Fabulous Arizona. And then it finally kind of just hit that point that it was like, okay, I can't do both anymore. But it was, taking that leap into self-employment, like you're just never going to feel ready. Yeah. And kind of the way things fell, I kind of got forced into doing it, I think, before I felt like I was ready. But I don't know if I ever would have been able to pull the trigger on my own, or, because I was just like, it's scary. So it kind of just was a sink or swim moment of, okay, now I've got to figure out how to pay my bills, and, the sassy pups need a roof over their head and all of that. So, so I just kind of like hit the ground, running, and all right, let's figure this out. So, so that was kind of the start of, so I went full-time self-employed. I think it was 2015. Yeah. 2015 was when I went full-time self-employed. And so, and so at that point I had already been running Fabulous Arizona for about 5 years as a side hustle. So, so a lot of times I meet people now that they see where I'm at and think that like, especially because Instagram's, I feel like people really in the last few years have gotten really into Instagram, and they think that like this kind of happened overnight. And, people that I meet more recently, and I'm like, this has been a decade in the making. So, so yeah, it's been a lot of hard work and, and many, many years.
Cool. No, there's so much to unpack there. I mean, I love the building it organically, bootstrapping and figuring it out. I'd love to touch on that. But kind of before that, I mean, Fabulous Arizona, there's so much on there. I mean, I've seen real estate. I've seen there's a lot of content about what's all fabulous about Arizona. Yeah. Really, what is it? And I guess what is the business model there?
Well, so it's the idea is lifestyle. So, covering all aspects of Arizona. I mean, you see a lot of people that focus just on food or just on fashion. But, for me, it was like, I want to cover everything, like a magazine, because my background was in, the national magazines that I worked for. They were the same thing. They covered kind of all realms. And then same thing with the local magazine that I worked for, we covered everything. So, so I liked the idea of like having that versatility of being able to cover a lot of different things, especially as we've seen in the last year with how, different industries are doing well and others aren't. So if my business fully relied on just the hospitality industry, I'd be screwed. Yep. Whereas, we have other areas that we can, still grow in that, are still doing well in the economy, like the real estate, sector, and even, hospitals and doctors' offices and that sort of thing are doing well, like telemedicine and that sort of thing. So, thankfully, because we are so broad, we are able to, pivot easier than maybe someone that's more, locked in on one area. So yeah, so we kind of cover everything. Obviously, the way we make money is advertisers, just like a magazine would. So so I mean, obviously the idea is highlighting everything fabulous. We really like to support local, of course, but also you kind of have to like weigh, who has ad dollars too. So, sometimes you have to, promote some of those bigger guys because, we got to make a living as well.
Yeah. And from a publisher side, because I haven't been on that side too much. I'm usually the one running the ads and placing ads on publisher sites. Right. How does that work? So it's, I mean, you have ad placements and I mean, in a magazine, it's here's a one pager, here's a quarter sheet. I mean, how does that work from a digital perspective?
So that's the thing is people all the time, they just want me to like hand them like, like a rate card, like you would for a magazine. And I I like to say, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? What is your business? And then work backwards from there. Because I really like to put together packages that are going to actually convert, like that are going to work for them. Because I don't feel like a one size fits all is the answer. And especially with digital, you have that ability to really customize and tweak things and really make them and obviously I've been in this long enough. I'm like, I know what works and what doesn't. So I can make recommendations based on that. So I like to put together packages that way. We include a lot of native advertising. So, banner ads, we don't really sell too much because it's just not, we've kind of.
So 2005.
Yes, exactly. That was kind of all the rage. I feel like 2005, 2010, especially in the space that I was in at that time. I mean, banner ads that was what everybody was doing. Now people just aren't as interested in that. It's also really difficult desktop to mobile for banner ads because, we can run certain banner ads on desktop for them, but like, how are those going to convert to mobile for them? Now we have to, figure out how that works. So I feel like the banner ads, especially on a local level, are not of interest. Maybe if someone's looking for brand awareness and they like want to do maybe a takeover, that would do well. But if somebody's looking for like, I want somebody to click to my website and go buy this thing, or click to my website and make an appointment, banner ads probably aren't going to do it. It's kind of more of a brand awareness tool. Whereas we like to, do like social media posts, content that could be, valuable to the readers, but also, going to benefit the advertiser as well, special offers for our readers, that sort of thing. And then of course we have our weekly newsletter, which is probably the most valuable tool that we have to sell because everyone that signed up for that, they're, highly engaged. They have chosen to be on that list. And they, especially our weekly newsletter, people look forward to that every week to see, we feature new restaurants and the upcoming events. And so people love to use that as kind of like their tool of like, where am I going to go eat this weekend and stuff like that. So that's been the newsletter has been one of our best marketing tools.
That's awesome. No, I mean, it's essentially, where's the attention at? I mean, you got the newsletter, that's where attention is. You got eyeballs, it's more valuable real estate. One thing that I get a lot is, banner ads native, people say, oh, it's just the sponsored stories at the bottom, what native ads are. But in terms of how you're hitting the right people, you talk about ROI, we're super ROI focused. How, from a publishing side, how do you ensure that brand reaches the right user, whether it's that demographic and whatnot?
Well, and that's why, we look at all our demographics and we kind of have honed in on who we want to be reaching. Yeah. And so we create our content based around that. So honestly, if an advertiser comes to me and even if they want to give me all this money, if it's not the right fit, I will tell them no, because the last thing I want is someone to spend money with me and they're not reaching the right people and they don't get a return. It's also a disservice to my readers. If they're like, why are you, advertising this to me when it's completely irrelevant. So that's another reason why I will have to sit there and, okay, what are your goals? Who are you trying to reach? Is this the right fit before I'll let somebody advertise with us in that way?
Nope. Totally makes sense. Totally in the weeds right there. But I want to kind of get back to the business side. I love that you mentioned, it was a side hustle. You grew it. You kind of jumped into the fire. What are the things that you were doing to grow organically? Because a lot of people think, oh, if I just had the capital, I could grow. But it's obviously you can grow a little bit quicker, but there's a lot of opportunities in growing organically without huge budgets and huge advertising budgets and whatnot. So what are some of those things that you did where it was like, all right, once I started doing more of this, started growing and got you closer to being able to make that leap of faith?
Well, I'll give you two things that are just very for any kind of business, regardless of, who you are or whatever. And then I can give you one example for specifically for what, for digital, if you're like a blogger or a publisher or something. But one of the biggest things I did was literally just going out and networking and talking to everybody and making sure that they knew what Fabulous Arizona was. And, that was one of the things where people think I was a really outgoing person and I actually wasn't. And now I am because I'm like, I've forced myself into it. But when I first started out, this was 2011 and I was, I would show up to these events with a handful of business cards and be like, I don't know anybody in this room, but I'm just going to go up to people and just start talking to them, make sure they know what Fabulous Arizona is and just spreading the word that way. And so I would be at 2-3 different events every night of the week, like just trying to get the word out and making sure people knew who we were. And that's kind of how I also actually built my personal brand, which was never part of the intention, but people were like, Cynthia's everywhere. She knows everything going on in town. So then I kind of built this personal brand as well by default. So literally just getting yourself out there. And I have so many people that they come up to me and they're like, I don't have the confidence. I could never do that. I'm so nervous talking to people. And I'm like, I would be sick to my stomach driving to these events, like literally wanting to throw up. And then by the time you get in there and you talk to people, like, yeah, I mean, sometimes it's not the most comfortable. But more often than not, people were very receptive. They were nice. I'd walk out feeling like a million times better. So, but the scariness of walking into those events didn't go away for quite a while. And that's normal. And I think people need to kind of embrace that and, get comfortable being uncomfortable, I think is a great way to put it. So that was one thing. And then the other thing is collaborations. So teaming up with other people. I think too many people look at it as competition, and I'm all about collaboration over competition, and there's strength in numbers and there's room for everybody. So I think by me teaming up with other, businesses or other, I even like would cross promote with different magazines in town and stuff like that, to kind of help get the name out for Fabulous Arizona. So I think people definitely need to look at that in terms of like teaming up with other people as opposed to feeling like, oh, they're competition and siloing themselves. There's just so much strength in numbers.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's funny because we love that little hashtag community over competition. It's abundance over scarcity. And I mean, it's really mindset. Love that. And I mean, knowing that networking, leads to collaborations as well. We've had quite the year of 2020 and can't really network a whole lot. So, I mean, knowing that that's how you kind of got started, how have you kind of transitioned to what you're doing now? And how have you kind of adjusted with 2020 or how have you had to adjust?
Well, I mean, obviously 2020 has actually been a good year for me in the sense, I mean, obviously it was bad because, hotels, restaurants and whatnot are not doing well. And that's, one of the biggest things we promote on the website. But also I'm digital. And so it's just kind of like, that's where everybody is. Everybody's on social, everybody's on, online. And even more so for the agency side, because we are a digital agency, people were like, we need help now more than ever. Like we weren't really taking this that seriously before, and now we have to be online. So quickly going back to the networking aspect of it, social media. I mean, you've got everyone you could possibly want at your fingertips on social media. So, being active on social media, and even if that's just commenting on people's stuff and engaging and keeping yourself top of mind for people. That's one of the big things that I try to do. I feel like I've been so busy lately. I'm probably not as good as I used to be about, documenting my days, but just, I'm posting so often that people if everybody knows what I do. There's no question, there's no question about that. So, when it comes to a time that somebody might need a service that I offer, I come top of mind because I'm always in their face. Like they can't forget about me. So I think doing that. And so I kind of use social media as way to, I don't really use LinkedIn as often, honestly. I'd rather use Facebook and Instagram because I can then if I go to an event and meet some people or something and I connect with them there, I can see oh, they just went on this vacation or they just got this new dog or whatever. And so when I send them a message, I'll always include some kind of personal, thing that I can pull from their social media. Oh, it looks like you just had a really great trip in Hawaii. I hope you had a blast. Then there's my pitch. But they're going to feel more inclined to respond if I've included some kind of personal note in there. So that I find is a really helpful tool to use social media for. But also just, going in and commenting on people's stuff, being supportive, being positive, and they're, it's going to keep you top of mind when you're commenting on people's things. And someone did something great and you're like, oh, congratulations, that's awesome. Constantly doing those kinds of things and making sure you're connecting with those people online is a great way to network in this time when we can't be doing these networking events in person and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love it. And that being said, I'm hearing positivity, community over competition. How it sounds like you're a super positive and optimistic type of person. How much has mindset, positivity, optimism all played in kind of the growth of your personal brand, Fabulous Arizona, and the agency?
Huge. Because not everything has been roses for me. There have been times that have been so hard, and I've been at rock bottom, in the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, as I'm sure there's times that you're like, what the heck am I doing? I should give up. Even my family at one point was like, please go get a job. No more of this. You need health insurance and all these other things and benefits. And, and I was just like, no, I'm going to make this happen. And so mindset's huge. I do, one of my favorite little tips and tricks and tools, I guess, if you will, is a gratitude journal. And so, you write down 3 things each day. And I usually do it before I go to bed. Some people like to do it to start their day. But I kind of feel like sometimes I need it more at night than I do. Like I kind of am naturally a morning person. So I wake up kind of in a good mood regardless. Because I kind of feel like opportunities, for the day. But then by the end of the day, it might be like, today did not go like how I wanted. I really need this right now. So I like to do it before I go to bed, writing down, 3 things that I'm grateful for. And some days it might literally be just the fact that I have a roof over my head, and that's okay. And so, those kind of just, being grateful for the littlest things some days is something. And so I actually did this program a few years back. And it was like a 30-day program, and it's called the Human Compass. And each week has kind of a theme. And then by each day, it kind of narrows it down more specific. So for example, one of the weeks, the theme was kind of where you live. And so the first day, it's kind of like, we're not in a third world country. So it starts out really broad, and then it narrows it all the way down to your home. And so like, I'm, lucky that I have a home that I, feel comfortable in, and I'm happy and whatever, so it just narrows it down, and it starts, in the morning when you wake up, you can either choose audio or, you can read a little article thing in the morning to start your day. And then it'll kind of like just send you little reminders throughout the day to kind of realign your thinking. And to go through that every single day for 30 days was like a real shift in like mindset and I took that at a time that like, I think it was about a year into my self-employment, and it was really hard. And I was just not necessarily in a good place at that point and really struggling with it. And I felt like it just having that mindset shift, tongue twister there, really helped me both personally and in my business to just really, be thinking in a more positive mindset.
Yeah. No, I mean, pretty much everyone in here played sports, and we're just huge on the mindset and I mean, mental toughness and whatnot. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I love the psychology part that you mentioned. I love I love psychology. That's a huge reason why I like the content side and the distribution, getting around it. But I mean, you even get down to when you're deciding when to be grateful, knowing how that's going to impact your day. Your routine. I mean, I think the biggest struggle for small business owners and just entrepreneurs is struggling to find how to prioritize time. Yeah. How have you been able to do that? Because I mean, it sounds like you do a great job. You know exactly when to do the right thing, and how have you kind of learned how to do that?
That was tough. I mean, when I first started out, I definitely wasn't. That was one of the things I struggled with, was prioritizing, because it felt like everything was a priority. So like, how do you like figure out like what gets done first? So I used to have like to-do lists that were like 20 things long, and I was just like so overwhelmed. And I actually got this planner, and it's so silly. I mean, it's like a $60 planner. So it's like, you could probably do this with any cheaper planner or a piece of paper, but there was something about the fact that it was like a pretty planner but it had you pull out the top 3 things of the day that had to get done. So I would, even though I would have 20 things on my list, it kind of like having that spot that's like, here are the top 3, like kind of forced me to like make that prioritization of like, okay, what are the 3 things that have to be done today? Even if I don't get to everything else on the list, this is what has to be done. So I think just taking that time in the morning to pull out like what has to be done today and what would not be the end of the world if it waits till tomorrow, I think is doing that. Because I remember when I first went self-employed, I would stay up all night trying to finish everything on my to-do list every day. And it was just maddening. And it was like, I was less productive because I was getting less sleep, and I was, not feeling as well. And again, starts to affect your mental health if you're not sleeping well enough. And so I think making, like, really forcing yourself to prioritize, and that being part of your morning routine. And I think as self-employed people, especially when you're working from home, whereas I know even non-self-employed people are working from home right now, I think morning routine's really critical in like getting yourself in the right mindset and setting yourself up for a successful day. So I go do my walk with the dogs in the morning to kind of like clear my head and get a little exercise. And then I sit down and, take a look at my list and prioritize before I start anything.
How are you at saying no?
I used to be horrible at it. Horrible.
Okay. What was the thing that made you go from horrible to good at it? Because it sounds like, you've learned how to master that. I think part of that is figuring out, being able to say no helps you prioritize your time a bit more.
Well, I started realizing like, I'm not making the money that I could because I'm spending too much time on things I should be saying no to. And I think it was kind of that realization of like hitting that burnout point of just doing too much. And especially when you're someone like, I'm a very empathetic person and I want to help everybody. And, running a local, the passion behind Fabulous Arizona is I love supporting small local businesses. And so it's like, I want to help everybody. And so when people come to me and they're like, oh, I have this little business and I want help, and and you just want to help everybody. But at some point, like you can't do it all.
Help yourself too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I started realizing like, at some point you have to say no. So I actually, every year, I'm not a big New Year's resolutions person. I think that, I don't think the new year really means anything. Like, yeah, I'm like, you should take every day to like, resolve to be a better person, I guess. But I like to pick a word for the year to kind of focus an intention almost. And so it's funny that you say that because 3 years ago, my word was no. Really? My word was no for the year. Because I was like, I have spread myself way too thin and I really have to start getting more focused if I want to. And just, because you do as an entrepreneur, so many different opportunities come to you and it's easy to get unfocused and in too many different directions to where nothing's working because you're too all over the place. And so, really kind of being able to say, okay, this is what I want to focus on. And I need to start saying no to all these other things. And kind of also sitting down and looking at the year prior in terms of like what made money and what didn't. And let's start cutting out these other things. One of those things that I cut out was I was hosting a lot of events, and at the time it was like, oh, I'm making X amount for this one event. So it looked like a larger amount. But when you started looking at how many hours did I have to put into that event, it worked out to pennies per hour. So I was just like, okay, this, being able to look back at those things and realizing like, what is the actual ROI on some of these things and cutting those things out, I think is really important. And to make that assessment, I like to make that assessment like once a year, but some people, it might make more sense to do it quarterly or something. But yes, that was a big thing, was kind of saying, okay, what can I start saying no to? And it was kind of a game changer for me.
I mean, what I was just about to ask. I mean, how did that change your life just from like a personal emotional side things? And then also how did the business change after you started learning how to say no? And then has it gotten almost kind of addicting knowing, hey, I can own my own day and then I can work on the things I want to do that I know is actually going to impact more the people I want to impact, which is that small business. Yeah.
Well, I think just one kind of understanding that like, I don't have to feel guilty for saying no. That was probably the biggest hurdle to overcome. Everybody wants to go get coffee and I'm just like, I could have 50 coffee meetings a day if I said yes to everybody. So I started really cutting back. Like, I think it's Mark Cuban. He was like, unless somebody's writing a check, you're not taking an in-person meeting. I think he said something along those lines. Yeah. And so I started trying to use that as a rule of thumb. And so if I always do, like if someone reaches out to me wanting to potentially work with me in some capacity, whichever business it is, I will start with a phone call, a 15, 30-minute phone call, depending on what it is, to even see if it's a viable option, as opposed to wasting my time going to sit and to get a coffee meeting. Because even if you go for a coffee meeting, not only are you wasting the time driving there and back, but then typically the meeting ends up an hour long, as opposed to like if you're on the phone, you can get it done in probably 20 minutes and without the driving. So it's a much more efficient way. So that way I can weed out, like, is this even an option? Should we even be working together? Then if it is, then we can move on to like an in-person meeting. So that's actually one of the things that I've loved so much about 2020 is that things have gone so virtual with meetings. And so I think that's something that needs to stay. And that's kind of made it easier, obviously, this year to kind of force the phone calls and the, Zooms and that sort of thing. But, I think shifting to that of doing, phone calls first, make sure it's a good fit. And then, just finding polite ways to tell people that it's just not a good fit, or, I'm sorry, I just don't have the bandwidth for that right now, or my focus is over here. This doesn't align with what I'm focusing on. That was kind of the challenge of figuring out how to word it in a way that like, they could understand, but I didn't have to feel bad about it.
Yeah.
So
no, that's always the hardest part is, you don't want to, you're in business to make people happy and serve a certain demographic, whatever it may be. And, saying no typically doesn't make people happy. And it's just tough. Yeah. It's tough. You've gone through quite a bit of ups, you've had some learning experiences, but through, starting both businesses, what's been the biggest kind of, not so much hurdle, but aha moment that you kind of struggled with, and what was it like to kind of overcome that?
I would have to say like, yeah, I'm like, there's so many. probably like asking for help or like getting help, you know, like and understanding like what your strengths are and filling in the people around you that, you know, fill in those holes that, you know, that you're maybe not so good at. So I hired, for Fabulous Arizona, I mean, I've had, you know, some freelance writers and that sort of thing. But it was primarily me for the last decade. And I've always been so scared because that was my baby. And I was so proud. And I'm very, very picky about like everything, photos, content, spacing, like formatting. Like I'm very anal about every little thing on the website and the social media and all that. And so I was really scared to bring somebody on because I was like, you know, I've been doing this for 10 years. Like, how can I take 10 years of, you know, what I've put into this and make someone else understand that? And, you know, so I hired Melissa, who's our editor-in-chief, in July. And she was the editor-in-chief actually for over a decade at Arizona Foothills magazine. Wow. So I saw she left there and I was like, so are you looking to do anything else now? And I knew her from like 2008. So I've known her a long time and I know she's, you know, a fantastic person, well-liked in the community. You know, obviously I would see her at different, you know, media events because we'd get invited to some of the same stuff. And so I'm like, I know she knows her stuff. She's, you know, very well liked, but I just didn't know like, what was this going to look like working with her? And, you know, at first I kind of was like worried, am I going to be hovering over her? Is it going to be extra work for me to be like double checking everything she's doing? And because I've brought the right person in, it ended up being something where I am like, she's doing this 10,000 times better than I could. Like I would go on the website and she would just have put stuff up that I didn't even know about. And I would just be like, wow, this looks amazing. Like, and she did it, you know, again, better than I would have done. So I think understanding, because I had tried to bring people on prior that it was, you know, teaching, it was more so teaching them as opposed to them filling that void that I, you know, filling the holes where I'm maybe not so good or my, you know, my weaker areas. So instead, me just showing them what I'm doing as opposed to bringing in somebody that can bring something new to the table. So I think that's probably a little combination of like ego and, you know, kind of letting that stuff go of like the control, the ego, that sort of thing, of letting that go and letting someone else that really knows what they're doing step in and kind of make it better. Yeah.
And again, I mean, how is that done on the personal emotional side in the business? Because I think that's something a lot of great entrepreneurs get healthy growth, but then kind of hit that ceiling. And it's kind of this is my baby. I don't want to give it up and everything needs to be 100% perfect, but it's tough to kind of scale at that point. I mean, but finding that balance, what are the impacts after you were able to kind of delegate, let people run, get that trust?
Growth. Because now I'm able to focus on the things I'm stronger at. Like, you know, I'm really strong with the sales. And I mean, because obviously like it's my baby. Nobody can sell better than I can. You know, so the sales and the marketing side, I've been able to take a stronger focus on. And also we are now expanding to other states. So I've been able to focus on, you know, I couldn't have, right now we have 5 states live and she's managing all of the writers in all the different states, all of the editorial on all the websites. There's absolutely no way I could have done that without her help. So understanding that like I couldn't have grown without bringing her on was kind of the, you know, the big the aha moment. So like, that's what I was saying, kind of like in order to grow, like I was never going to grow if I wouldn't have started building my team. But again, it's about finding the right people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're able to grow that baby into a toddler and then a teenager and to an adult. I mean, it's you baby it too much and it stays a baby forever. I mean, which is perfectly fine if that's what you want to do.
Yeah. And if that's what makes you happy and your goal is just to like, you know, because I mean, honestly, it's easier being a one-person team than managing people. So if you're happy with like, okay, I'm making this amount of money per year and I'm happy with that and I'm doing something that I love and that works for you, then that's great. But, you know, from day one, I've always had this vision of Fabulous Arizona being something so much bigger. And so, you know, that was always the plan. And it took me almost 10 years to make that move to expand it. But again, it was one of those things where I kept having every excuse of like, I'm not ready to expand. I'm not ready to, you know, grow. And it was just like, well, at what point am I going to be ready? And you're not. So you just have to kind of like take the leap and figure it out.
Yeah. No, it sounds like things are rock and rolling. And I have seen, I think it was Fabulous Wisconsin
Wisconsin. And so everyone's like, why Wisconsin? And I'm originally from there.
Right?
Yeah. So I was like, that was an easy one to just kind of like, that was my first one that I launched. And I remember I had every excuse in the book not to do it. It sat for a year before I actually launched it. Like I had the website ready, I had the social media ready, but I just wasn't doing anything with it. And one of my friends and mentors, Alenka, she was like, just do it and just like get started. Like it doesn't matter if you have all the answers yet. Cause I kept thinking I had to have everything figured out before I launched it. So Wisconsin made sense because I could just go up there, crash with family because I still have all my aunts, uncles, and cousins still live up there and just kind of figure it out. And once I got up there, it was just the response was amazing. Like people were so excited because there's just such a lack of something like that up there. And so businesses were super excited to work with me. I had several, writers reach out to me that just found us on Instagram and were like, how can I get involved? So, so that kind of let me see like, okay, there is a, market for this in other states. And so once I launched that, a couple girls in 2 different cities randomly they don't even know each other. They both reached out to me within a month of me launching Fabulous Wisconsin, asking me to launch Fabulous Iowa. So Iowa came next. And I know kind of like random states and people are probably like, what's so fabulous about Iowa and Wisconsin? But that's what's been kind of fun about launching these new ones is finding these hidden gems in each state. Really cool, especially like some of these other states that have so much more history than, Arizona does is there's some really cool, like historic, things that have a lot of great stories behind them. And so we also have Washington and California live now too.
That's cool. No, because everyone's done stuff on New York, Chicago. The big places. The Iowa. There's not too many people that are just. And it's
filling a void for sure. And and I was a little nervous about doing California just because one, there's so many magazines and bloggers out there, and it's a massive state, obviously. So it's kind of like, where do we have to break it up? We don't really know yet. And so I was holding off on launching that, but there's so much crossover in Arizona. So I have so many, PR people and businesses that I work with that they have locations or clients in California that are like, let's go, like, let us know. And so I'm like, well, the opportunity is there. So I've got to, run with it. And, we still haven't quite figured out how we're going to run. Right now, we're just running everything under the same categories, but at some point we might break them up into like, regions just because California is so large, maybe even if it's just northern and southern, but again, trying to just figure it out as we go. We don't have all the answers and that's okay. And I think, a lot of people get hung up on having to have everything figured out. And quite frankly, even if you have it all figured out, once you start going, things are going to change and you're going to have to change. And I think if you have too rigid of a plan in place, you actually might fail because you're not going to be fluid enough to make those pivots and adjustments as you need to.
Yeah. Because if you're not hitting those marks and it's like, well, in real time, you should be going a little to the right. And it's like, well, no, it says we're supposed to go to the left. You might get discouraged that it's not really happening, and being able to pivot in real time. It just helps with your own internal expectations. And I think business is a living, breathing thing. And I think to your point, it's amazing. Especially working on the creative side, it's a lot of people want that. We need to be 100% perfect before we get to market. But it's like, okay, we spent all that time. By the time we get to market, the data shows us that we're way off and now we need to adjust. And it's finding that healthy balance.
Yep.
Yeah. And you guys are working on a lot. You're expanding. What are some of kind of your personal and business goals over the next 3 to 6 months? Kind of keep it on the short term. So we launched, we only had the 2, we had Wisconsin and Arizona. And then once, I brought Melissa on, we launched the other 3 in the last 6 months. And, I was kind of like, okay, let's take a step back. Cause I didn't know, like, are we going to launch 1 per month or 1 per quarter? What is that going to look like? And we launched all 3 within a couple months, and it was like, okay, we need to pump the brakes a little bit here and like get things more, more streamlined and make these ones really tight and have our systems down and our processes down on these ones. And then, so we're, taking first quarter here. We've decided we're going to just focus on those 5 for the first quarter and really get those, nailed down. Obviously, COVID has definitely inhibited a lot of these other states. Arizona obviously has continued to stay open and do well. Not that that's necessarily a good thing for COVID purposes, but it's been, from a business perspective, it's been good because we've been able to, maintain advertisers and content. Whereas, with these other states, it's like, Washington, for example, there's no indoor dining at all whatsoever. So, we're trying to figure out like, okay, and especially because, me and Melissa and our managing editor, Kylie, like we don't live in, we live here. So we are trying to stay on top of like all these different regulations in all these different states. And it's been really challenging to try and like stay on top of like what's open where and what can we cover, and is it even feasible to try and get advertising dollars from some of these other states when their economies are just not doing like as well as ours is. So that's kind of also inhibited the growth a little bit, and makes me want to pause a little bit and kind of see how this first quarter shakes out before we make our next move, because I haven't even decided
I have an idea of which states I want to do next, but I'm like, I kind of want to see where things are going to go over the next few months before we make that decision, because, maybe we want to go with a more conservative state or something, if that's going to affect, what we can cover and that sort of thing and the growth. So the plan is to continue to obviously grow and really solidify the 5 states we already have. And then hopefully I'm thinking 1 state per quarter for the rest of the year. Once we, get through the first quarter, maybe one state per quarter for the rest of the year. And then I also have, the marketing agency, Say Less Media, and I have a business partner with that one. So, we've got some goals there of, where we want to go with that as well, in terms of, kind of just, we're at a point where we've got a good base of clients, but we want to start, saying, who do we really want as clients? Because we've had some that are, you get those clients that you're like, when you're starting out and you're like, well, it's money, we'll take it. Yes. So you say yes to everybody. And then it's like, we're now in a position where it's like, okay, we can be picky about, who we want to take on. So we want to because most of my clients, because before I did this agency, I was kind of just freelancing some, marketing stuff for different businesses, just because doing Fabulous Arizona, obviously I meet a lot of business owners that need digital help. So, I kind of wanted to, I would get people just coming to me, and as opposed to prospecting, who do I want to work with? Yeah. So our goal for this year is to kind of really sit down and say, who are the people, the businesses we really want to work with? And maybe it's something that we're passionate about, or, or the type of client. So I have clients in all different industries. So it's kind of more so that the business owner that I kind of choose who I want to work with based on that, because, if they're passionate and, and kind of we're on the same page in terms of, what direction they want to go. That's kind of where I like to decide if it's a good fit or not.
No, that's awesome. And from the agency side, what do you guys do there?
So we're full service. So we have, my strong suit is obviously just the social media, digital side. But, my business partner is more the creative. So, videography, photography, copywriting, that sort of thing. And then we have, our team of people that do web development and PR and stuff like that. So we really can offer everything. But, we're really passionate about kind of a more cohesive brand look and feel for people. Yeah. I feel like a lot of times that's the piece that a lot of people are missing, is they don't have a brand identity. They're kind of all over the place. And it's just what are you selling? It's too and so really honing in on what is their message? Who is their demographic? Cause you sit down with clients and a lot of times they'll be like, everybody's my customer. And it's no, they're not. So helping them really hone in on who is their customer, making that, a distinction of what are they, what is their messaging? And that's kind of my favorite part of working with those clients, is really, figuring out that brand message.
Yep. No, that makes sense. There's so many people that say, I got budget to spend. Let's start running ads. Let's start landing people on pages and all that. But it's well, who are you trying to reach? What is your goal? What problems do you solve? It's good questions. That being said, there's a lot of people that struggle with that. And knowing that you love that, what are some tips that you have for people that kind of, they're growing, but don't have that, their mission, their vision kind of mapped out, and
they really need to sit down and, there's that, I actually learned this is actually an old school marketing thing. Probably one of the only things I actually learned in marketing at school. But that whole idea of you create a kind of a persona for your customer. And so you kind of say this is Joe and he likes to skateboard on the weekends or whatever, and you kind of create this person that's your customer, and determining, what is the age range? What do they like to do? And kind of just understanding who your customer should be. And then also understanding your services and how to streamline marketing that. I've had a lot of clients that are really all over the place with that kind of stuff. And they're trying to offer everything. And it's maybe we need to focus in a little more here. I feel like I've run into that a lot with people that are offering services that don't even aren't even in the same realm. It's just it makes it very challenging to market a business when they, it's kind of who are you and what do you do? Yeah. So I think, really honing in on who is your customer first and foremost before you even go into, who you are. Yeah. So figuring out who are you marketing to and what's going to appeal to them, and, and then and then building off of that. I think that's kind of the first building block is figuring out who that customer is.
No, that's great. Because that's all I think all this marketing stuff is, with the ability to target using data and all that type of stuff. It's just having a conversation. And if you can sit down and build those avatars or personas or whatever they are. It's you have an identity of who you're trying to communicate with, and you can actually have a conversation rather than, to me, I equate it to it's just too many people just running outside, just yelling to everyone. Yes. But it's like you're not having a conversation. And that's what we need to be doing in today's digital world, is having a conversation and knowing who your audience is allows you to build a creative, build a target, all that type of stuff to have that conversation.
Yeah. And also, I mean, with social media, I feel like the other thing with that is, with your messaging is, now that you know who your customer is, what's going to be valuable to them? Because you can't just sell. Like, your messaging when you're doing social posts and stuff like that, you have to be providing value as well. So like, offering tips or, and I feel like something that people forget about a lot as business owners is they forget to put themselves in, like, you're a consumer too. Like, what would I as a consumer want to see? Why, like me as a consumer, why do I follow the accounts I follow? And thinking about it as a consumer, I feel like people forget that kind of stuff. So I feel like that's probably the easiest way, is to just put yourself, all of us are consumers in some shape or form. So just taking that step back and saying, if I were a consumer, what would I want to see? Why would I follow this account? Why would I visit this business? And taking those things and, implementing them. Yeah. Seems very common sense to me, but I don't know.
I mean, most of those small fixes are, when you take a step back, it's like, oh, wow, that is pretty common sense. It's weird how whenever you get in the day to day, you kind of get blinders on.
You get lost in yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I love that. It's all about value. Like you said, everyone is sell this, buy this, and it's provide value. And that being said, you tons of wisdom. You've done quite a bit. For that person that's starting out as an entrepreneur, even in the content side of things, if they're trying to become a publisher, what is the biggest piece of advice that you would have for someone as they're trying to figure out, all right, I don't know what I'm doing. I know that I have a passion for this. How do I keep growing? What's the biggest piece of advice you'd have for them?
For one, surround yourself with other people that are, kind of in that same mentality of like growing and, wanting to build something. I think, if you're surrounded by people that are not of that same kind of mindset, it could set you back and, prevent you from, growing. When you surround yourself with people that are doing similar things or better things than you, which is even better, it's going to kind of bring you up to that level and keep you in that same mindset. And I also think like finding mentors that, can help guide you in those kinds of things and maybe help you get there a little faster than maybe they did, and learn from some of their mistakes and failures, maybe from their past, that will help you, move a little faster on the process.
Yep. No, I can agree more. There's something that's literally the last like 6-7 episodes. It's mentorship. That's it's been huge. And as we kind of wrap up, there's so much we'd love to talk about. Maybe we'd love to do something near the end. We can go over the growth that you've had, but from the personal branding to mentorship, there's so much. I'd love to catch up again. Well, I really appreciate it. I appreciate the time. I'm excited to watch the growth. You're growing quickly, and it's great. Especially,
well, you say quickly, but I'm like, it's quickly over the last. It's like overnight success took 10 years. But it's definitely on a trajectory right now, which we're excited about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to watch the continued growth, and looking forward to catching up sometime in the future. And appreciate the time.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.